state of Indiana is in mourning after what Governor Mike Pence calls a week of heartbreak. 3 Indiana law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty within 1 week. Tipton County Deputy Sheriff Jacob Calvin, Indianapolis Police Officer Perry Wren, and Gary Police Officer Jeffrey Westerfield, who was shot to death on the morning of July 6th. Governor Pence has ordered flags to be lowered to half-staff statewide. Lakeshore's Sarah Holst will have more on the death of Gary Police Officer Jeffrey Westerfield later on in our broadcast. During a brief 3-day period following a U.S. District Court's June 25th finding that Indiana's marriage statute was discriminatory, same-sex couples throughout the state lined up to be married. By June 27th, a stay granted to the state pending an appeal put an end to those marriages. Those married during that brief period have been left in a sort of legal limbo. This week, Governor Mike Pence's general counsel clarified the state's stand on those marriages. They do not exist. The governor's office has directed the state to comply with the Indiana Marriage Code and to act as if the district court ruling of June 25th never happened. The governor's office, however, will respect the Court of Appeals order to recognize the Massachusetts marriage of Munster residents Amy Sandler and Nicole Kwasny. An educational facility in Porter County is wrapping up a successful relocation, but instead of moving students to a new building, an old building has moved closer to the students. The Porter County Career and Technical Education Center is now the new home to a 1912 Grand Trunk Railway Station. The Canadian National Railway, which owned the building, planned to demolish the structure until local residents devised a plan to relocate the building. Crews lifted the structure from its foundation last week, and this week moved it slowly across the railroad tracks and onto the Career Center's property. The building will remain there while a new foundation is prepared. Building trade students will then work to retrofit the building for use as a classroom space. This week, one state senator announced he is stepping away from his office for another post of public service. Republican Senator Jim Banks says he is set to be deployed to Afghanistan later this year. The Northeast Indiana senator serves as a Supply Corps officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve. A recent order called him for active duty on September 5th. Banks says he plans to stay on the November ballot for his Columbia City seat. An Indiana law allows Republicans from Banks' district to appoint a temporary replacement during his military leave. Banks is projected to return from service in May 2015. Lake County will finally be getting some federal funds to help offset monies spent during the nasty winter storm that enveloped Northwest Indiana and much of the rest of the state in early January. Although 29 other counties had already been approved for FEMA public assistance and snow assistance grants, Lake County had been notably absent from the list. Governor Pence's successful appeal will help Lake County recoup expenses for damaged roads, bridges, utilities, traffic control, and rescue operations, as well as some snow removal costs. Lake County is mourning the tragic loss of one of its own, Gary Police Officer Jeffrey Westerfield. Lakeshore Sarah Holst has been following this story, and she joins us now with more.
Kristen, Officer Jeffrey Westerfield served with the Gary Police Department for 19 years before he was gunned down in the line of duty July 6th. As police and local volunteers search for answers to how and why Westerfield was killed, the city and state are remembering a man that many have hailed as a hero.
The Gary Police Department is in mourning. On July 6th, Officer Jeffrey Westerfield was found unresponsive in his patrol car in the 2600 block of Van Buren Street with a gunshot wound to the head.
He's well liked. He was a K-9 officer, he was a traffic officer. His ex-wife is a Gary police officer, so it's a close-knit family.
The police and the city were joined in their grief by Indiana Governor Mike Pence, who traveled to the Gary Police Station to meet with Westerfield's family, including his 4 daughters.
Officer Jeffrey Westerfield was a hero to people in this community. He is a hero to all the people of Indiana.
Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson says Officer Westerfield was in the area that morning responding to a follow-up call from an earlier domestic dispute. A person involved in that dispute was detained for questioning early in the investigation.
We are fairly confident that the person of interest who is in custody is in fact the person who is responsible for this heinous act.
The death of one of their own is a painful reminder of the violence Gary officers work to combat each day. During a spike in violent crime last year, the mayor sought assistance from state police.
The state of Indiana worked in close cooperation with public safety leadership here in Gary and across the region to develop a series of recommendations.
There are also recommendations that are coming down this month as a result of our request to the Department of Justice to make some suggestions.
Police Chief Wade Ingram says 10 new officers have been added since the state police recommendations were issued last fall, and 15 new officers will be added next month.
One of the things I'm looking at is implementing a policy where officers working the evening and midnight shift work in pairs instead of working alone. I know that could be a safety issue in many situations, so that's something under review. I'm also effective immediately putting more officers on the streets, taking officers out of specialized units.
But as officials search for long-term solutions, the community is focusing its attention on supporting the family and officers who knew Jeffrey Westerfield. Wednesday, the Patriot Guard Riders, along with several local motorcycle clubs, rallied in front of the police station to help raise funds for the Westerfield family.
It actually started off with 3 clubs and about 20 bikes. And because of social media, it turned into what it turned into today.
More than 400 riders passed by the patrol car parked in front of the building as a memorial, each one dropping a rose for the fallen officer.
It speaks to how the community feels about their police, that they support their police, and it speaks to how people, especially police, fire, and military, are willing to stand up for brotherhood.
I think it raises the morale. I think it raises the spirit. I think it's encouraging to see this kind of turnout for one of our own.
We mourn with those who mourn, and we grieve with those who grieve in this state. I know that I speak on behalf of millions of Hoosiers when I say that the service and sacrifice of Officer Jeff Westerfield will never be forgotten.
Visitation for Officer Westerfield is scheduled for Sunday afternoon, with the funeral to follow on Monday. We turn now to a very different mission for justice. Former Lake County Superior Court Judge Mary Beth Bonaventura now serves as director of the Indiana Department of Child Services. The Lakeshore's Steve Walsh spoke with Bonaventura about her new role in a department once plagued by controversy.
Mary Beth Bonaventura took over as the head of the Department of Child Services in March of 2013 after 31 years as a judge in Lake County. She took over an agency that has faced numerous questions over handling of juvenile cases, including the death of children like Christian Choate of Gary, who was found buried under his concrete slab in 2011, even though the state investigators had had multiple contacts with the family over the years. Mary Beth Bonaventura, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is a tough job. This is an agency that even at times you were critical of as a judge. You've had about a year now, basically, to get your handle on things and make changes. Have you been able to make any changes in the system?
Well, you know, change takes a while, because first what you have to do is assess what the issues are. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, because it's an agency of nearly 4,000 people. Almost 1,900 of whom are family case managers. And talking about family case managers, we have, this year we got 110 new case managers. So this is a constant process of hiring, identifying the right people, providing the right training, and then getting them ready to go out into real life situations that classrooms don't prepare you for. And so in assessing what the agency needs, I have made some changes, I've made some additions, and there'll be more to come.
The agency got a lot of criticism for reverting, I think, over $100 million, I think like $118 million back to the general fund over the last 5 years, even though at the time there was an increase in number of deaths from abuse and neglect. In the end, do you think that was a mistake to put all that money back in the general fund?
Well, I wasn't the director during that time, so I really can't speak to the reasons that amount of money was reverted. Last year we reverted $3 million. And there's a reversion policy statewide, which is why Indiana is pretty healthy as far as money goes. And so I can just tell you that the money that we reverted, none of that money would have gone. I mean, it would have gone to children and families, but we didn't take it from children and families to revert it. We have the programs in place that I think meet the needs of the families at this time.
I mentioned Choate in the introduction, but there was a case that came up a little more recently. The Young family, 3 children died in a fire in Hammond. They had been in foster care. They were returned back to the family, to a house that didn't have electricity, didn't have gas at the time. the department has kind of a policy to really put an emphasis on reuniting families. Do you think in this case that was the wise thing to do?
Well, a couple of things about what you said, Steve. First of all, the family wasn't returned to a home without electricity. At the time, from what I understand, a court order was in place to return the children to a home that had functioning gas, electricity, water. The family had participated in the program of care, treatment, and rehabilitation. So it's not just the policy of the department, it's the law in the state of Indiana that if children and families, mostly the parents, comply with the program that the court orders them to participate in, then we should return the children. And that's what happened in this case. The children were returned to the parents who presented. There were plenty of service providers in the room that said, yes, they had met all of the requirements that the court had set out and that they should be returned. And so what happened after that, really the court didn't have any control over, nor did the agency, because the people then moved from there into another home, which is what led to the children's death.
Do you think DCS shares any of the responsibility in that case?
Responsibility in a sense that, were we responsible for the children dying? Probably not. Could we do things better? We always can do better. Maybe had we been extended wardship longer, hindsight is always 20/20 vision, we always know that. So maybe if we had extended wardship longer, we would have seen that the parents would have gone back to a certain pattern. But then, you're criticized if you do and you're criticized if you don't. If you don't follow what the law is, you're criticized. If you do, you're criticized. So we just do the very best we can, and hope and pray that that's good.
Well, unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Mary Beth Bonaventura, head of the Department of Child Services, thank you so much for being on.
And thank you for having me.
This week, Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly honored Hoosier civil rights leaders on a national stage in a speech on the U.S. Senate floor. Since the signing of the Civil Rights Act this month 50 years ago, local officials say the fight for greater civil rights in the region took root in part in the Steel City. It's a legacy still being examined today.
1964, a time of transition for a place known as the 20th century city.
Even though my parents told me I could do anything I wanted to do, my country told me, no, you can't.
In the early 60s, the African American population of Gary was approaching 50%. That picketed businesses, that discriminated in hiring.
Lane says African Americans in Gary, Indiana were isolated in the Central District, and discriminatory hiring practices meant white residents got the good jobs.
Segregation was not so painful as it was isolating and denying one the option to see what the options were.
The Steel City's answer to a growing swell for equal treatment for all residents was to elect Richard Gordon Hatcher. Let us dare to make a new beginning, Hatcher said on Inauguration Day for the country's first black mayor.
He had the full cooperation of Lyndon Johnson and national Democrats. People in Washington, D.C. wanted to see the Gary experiment succeed.
By 1972, the city was the hub of a black power push when Hatcher hosted the National Black Political Convention at Westside High School. Thousands of black leaders, including Jesse Jackson, filled the gymnasium.
That seemed to be at that time beyond anybody's imagination. Much of the idea came from Mayor Richard Hatcher. It was so exciting. He's a great man.
The civil rights movement had really started a human rights movement. This nation had just kind of accepted everybody's inequality.
But is the Civil Rights Act's legacy one of a more equal America 50 years later? People still seem divided. A March 2014 CBS poll found 8 in 10 Americans say the act had a positive effect on America. But conversely, a 2013 Pew poll found 50% of Americans say more needs to be done to achieve racial equality. Decades after the historic gathering at Westside, Jackson says the county with Indiana's second largest black population has a legacy of being left out.
It's ironic that we're sitting here today out here in Merrillville because I've been out here maybe 5 times in 35 years. Because when Mayor Hatcher won the city of Gary, the whites moved in mass and set up a whole new town.
White area public officials organized to create the town of Maryville.
And it was not just the steel mill collapse that hurt Gary. That not allowed Gary to remain the great city it was.
Perhaps no better party to evaluate Gary's state of racial and economic equality today than the generation walking his trodden path.
The first time I actually kind of got a guess of it was when I looked at the Betty and Coretta movie. And I looked at the gym and I said, that gym looks mighty familiar. I said, that looks like West Side's gym.
19-year-old David King of Gary is a graduate of West Side. He learned about the convention on his own.
I think we see it now as a thing that we learn through history books.
The problem today is that we have very few militant, truly militant people who will stand up and speak the truth. The Jesse Jacksons.
But King, who was mentored by Hatcher, says equality today is affected through a movement.
It has to go beyond a convention. It has to go beyond talking, speeches.
For King, a student of history, the two generations, decades apart, have the same affinity for championing positive change.
Our generation is an action-driven generation, which is we're going to actually be out doing what we talked about. Our generation operates on action. Action is us.
You can find more information on the Civil Rights Act of 1964 on lakeshorepublicmedia.org. More than 2 decades of leadership have defined the career of South Shore Arts Executive Director John Kane. And this week's Eye on the Arts, the artist becomes the subject.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Eye on the Arts. I'm Tricia Hernandez, and our special guest is John Kane, who is the Executive Director of South Shore Arts. We're switching it up for this particular edition. Welcome, John.
Thank you. We haven't done this in a long time.
We haven't,
No.
we haven't. But we're talking about 2 things, and one is the wonderful exhibit we have up, Baby Boom or Bust. It goes through August 31st. And then we're also talking about a milestone for you, a 60th birthday, no sympathy for me, coming up next Friday, July 18th, and we're having, who knew, a party and a fundraiser.
Yes, of course.
We kind of do that. I
Yeah.
think we've spent our lives doing that.
Exactly.
So anyway, you want to talk to us a little bit about the exhibit and about the party.
Well, the exhibit is called Baby Boomer Bust because I was happy then.
You're not happy now?
Well, I was happy then.
Okay,
Let's
okay.
just say that. But you know, that was a wonderful time to be a child because
Yes, it was.
television had been invented and there was just this explosion of commercialism and advertising and all of those toys that they made for us, Barbie and Ken and G.I. Joe.
Howdy Doody.
Howdy Doody is one of my
I
favorites.
know, it is
well,
one of your favorites.
Yes, we do have one entire case devoted to Howdy Doody. We have several Barbie cases, and I don't mean carrying cases. I mean big
Regular
exhibit cases
cases.
full of Barbie's dream house and stuff. And it's so fun to see the little kids coming in.
They're like squealing.
Oh, they love it. And now this one little girl was like the first child I saw come to visit the show, and she's told her mother that it was creepy looking at the Barbie dream house. Who is this child? I want to know.
Oh my goodness. Well, talk about Brian J. Sullivan has his
paintings up.
His paintings up, and they're large scale, and
Huge paintings.
And they go with this whole Americana mid-20th century thing.
Yeah, and he captures all kinds of advertising and movie stars and superheroes and whatnot, that all the kind of iconic imagery of that period that, you know, was the background to our baby boom.
Our baby boom.
Kittyhoods.
All right,
yeah.
now let's talk about your birthday party. Everyone is invited.
Yes.
And it's next Friday, July 18th.
You just have to pay
Just call Kelly. You have to pay $75.
Yeah, but you get an open bar, and it's not icky stuff. It's the good stuff.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, very good. Just call Kelly for your reservations. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Eye on the Arts.
Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.
There's a place in Hobart where laser tag is all grown up and wearing combat boots. We check out Team Combat Live Extreme Laser Combat on this week's Jump in the Lake. First scenario, capture the flag.
One of the first games that people play when they arrive is a game called Master Capture the Flag. There are 3 flags, a red team flag, a blue team flag, and then there's the multi-team flag. This is usually up in the center island of the battlefield. It's upstairs in the center. The object of the game is that your team has to go capture the other team's flag first, and then that gives you the permission to go after the master flag, which is upstairs. So it's really a race to get to the master flag, but you can't grab this until you have captured the other team's flag.
Are you dying?
Red flag has been recovered.
Walk of shame. I accomplished nothing good.
I know.
I think I shot somebody a couple times. Did you seriously?
Yeah, I did. I went up there and died.
I didn't have I'd get to the staircase and die. Second scenario, disarm the bomb.
And defuse the bomb, one team, we call the terrorist team, they carry this code tube, and inside is a piece of paper with a 7-digit disarm code. The object for the Special Forces team is to find the person on the terrorist team, kill them, get this code, and get up to the bomb where you can defuse it. The bomb is all digital. There's a keypad on there.
Check this.
So you're going to get up there, put in the 7 digits before the bomb blows up.
Just when I was starting to follow orders. Third scenario, collect the pieces, build the bomb, disrupt the supply line.
The idea is that there's a convoy of supplies coming your way. Your job is to blow up the bridge before the supplies get there, cutting off those supplies from your enemy. You're going to go up to the bridge, plant the bomb, and put in the arming code, and then defend the bomb until it blows up.
We had so much fun shooting that. And I have to say that this is an activity for people who like laser tag but would like to bump it up a notch. Because it is extreme laser tag, no question about it.
Seems like a good indoor activity when it's hot outside in the middle of summer.
Yeah, if you want to get out of the sun, but you will still break a sweat. It is hard work, I will absolutely say that.
How about law enforcement? I heard that they get involved as well.
Yeah, they use the facility to help with training exercises for, I think, the National Guard and definitely local law enforcement. So it's a fantastic venue.
Wow.
And actually, if you'd like to find out more about Team Combat Live, all you need to do is go to our website, www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org, and you can see an extended segment of Jump in the Lake there. Sarah, what are we working on?
Well, next week I'll be visiting with a program over at Valparaiso University. It's a Chinese immersion program where they take some local youngsters and teach them a lot about Chinese culture, from the language to the food, something much more in depth than they'd get in a normal classroom lesson. The program runs about 2 weeks, and we'll be bringing you some of the highlights of that. So
that sounds like a great story.
Yeah.
And if you have a story that you want to share with us, feel free to reach out to us at tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Send your thoughts, concerns, or questions. And you can also reach us on Facebook and at Lakeshore Report on Twitter.
Right, so lots of ways for you to reach out and contribute and become a part of not just public television, but Lakeshore Report. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week on Lakeshore Report.